here.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, there we are. I'm Reverend Dave Thompson, and I'm glad to bring you back to our Civil Human Bible study today. I'm a civil human minister, and what that means is that I focus my ministry on building human peace and common ground. So in that effort, my approach is to look at these scriptures and to try to find those things that I feel are applicable across the board to all humans, regardless of our faith, regardless of our politics, and regardless of the way that we live our lifestyles. So let's go ahead and jump into the text today. It's in Matthew chapter 23, verses 25 through 28. And starting with verse 25. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you cleanse the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of extortion and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee, first clean the outside of the cup and dish, that the outside of them may be clean also. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are like whitewashed tombs, which indeed appear beautiful outward, but instead are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. Even so, you yourself outwardly appear righteous to men, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. This is the sixth part of our Pharisees conversation, today's Pharisees, looking at the experience here in Scripture where Jesus is actually attacking the religious leaders of the day, the Pharisees and the scribes, the people who were in charge of religion and really the law of the land at that time, because they were ruled by their religion in Israel at this time, 2,000 years ago. And Jesus is going through bullet points of how the leadership has failed the people and how they need to change who they are and what they do. And so we're now on part 6, where we're talking about something that is always been part of his conversation about the leadership, but he really nails it down and actually uses some pretty, again, controversial and quite offensive language to describe the Pharisees. And quickly to set up what's going on right now, for those of you who are joining for the first time, this is towards the end of his account that Matthew here gives us. And Matthew wrote this account of Jesus in the 1st century AD. And Matthew was one of the original disciples or students of Jesus. And so Matthew's given us the account of Jesus, who's finally going to the temple of their faith, which is this huge building where all of the most important stuff happens and all of the most important people are, and all of the most important rules are enforced and practiced. And so the Pharisees and the scribes, these are basically the people who rule over Israel and who know about the law and who teach the laws of their faith and of the country to all of the people below. And Jesus has come this is Passover, which is one of the most important holidays of the year for Jewish individuals, even today. So Jesus comes in here with hundreds of thousands of pilgrims. He gets to the temple where everybody's hanging out, starts teaching people. The leaders come over. We've seen before in the studies just before this, where the leadership has come to Jesus and started attacking him and trying to attack him and get him to say things that are going to put him in a politically complicated situation. Jesus, sidesteps all those attacks, and now he's attacking them. And this, again, I've said this before, but it's one of my favorite parts of who Jesus is, because we get to see the Jesus who has so much passion. And rather than just seeing the sort of peaceful, lovey, hippie, beatnik kind of thing, we get to see Jesus actually with some, well, to borrow a Jewish Yiddish term, chutzpah, right? This compelling strength to argue against them and call them out in front of people. So what is Jesus particularly claiming in this attack on the Pharisees? So let's go ahead and walk through the passage just a little bit. I want to set up what's going on so that you can understand what Jesus is saying for all of this. So first he says, Pharisees and teachers of the law, you guys are hypocrites. And we've talked about this term. Quickly, it means actors. It's a derogatory way to tell them you're only putting on an act. You don't actually believe what you're saying. You don't actually follow the things that you're saying that other people should follow. And so Jesus calls them out as hypocrites, and he does that all throughout this whole time, and even throughout the whole account of Jesus. One of his favorite words, because it's so true. Now he's talking about cleaning the outside of the cup. He says to them, okay, so you guys are experts at cleaning the outside of the cup and the dish. And Jesus is painting a very specific analogy here to say that you guys are great at cleaning. It's not that you're bad at cleaning, but you only clean the parts that are visible. You know, when I hold this cup here, for instance, I have cleaned the outside so that everybody can see the corgis on it, but also I've cleaned the inside because I don't want to drink dirt. And inside this is clean water. But you wouldn't know that. You have to trust it, right? You see the outside of the cup is clean, and so therefore you would assume that everything inside the cup is clean as well. Jesus is pointing out that that isn't the case, obviously. And even goes a step further than that. He says that you are unwilling to clean the inside, and the language here in the Greek is because it's already full of robbery and self-indulgence. So what's he talking about here? How in the world are they being self-indulgent, and who are they stealing from? It's the people right there that are sitting around Jesus and sitting around in the temple, the common folk, the people who have to come from all around the nation to Jerusalem to fulfill all of these religious laws that they've set up, all of these requirements that people have, all of these taxes that they levy against people. People have to offer a tenth of what they earn to the Pharisees. Plus there's all these little things that they've got to do in the temple to actually be a good person and to be acceptable in society. Why are they robbing? Because they're stealing the money from the people who are giving these taxes to the temple. Now, those taxes are supposed to go to the temple, right? Out of the overflow of people who have a lot, it's supposed to go to the central place where it can be redistributed. That's the whole point of the temple. But today, in Jesus' time that is, they're not redistributing it. They are, in fact, keeping it and living luxurious lifestyles. We've just seen a couple verses before that Jesus points out that they have dill and cumin and anise, which generally are expensive spices to have. They're not easy to come by, obviously, in the Middle East. And so he's pointing out the fact that they are living in absolute indulgence. I love that term self-indulgent because it really paints a picture of two things. One, they're only concerned about their own desires and needs. And two, they're doing it over and over and over again without any restraint or without question of what other people are doing in order for them to do that. I want to ask the question, does this apply to us today? 2,000 years removed, I think you don't need me to point out too much, but yeah, we have ministers today. I'll speak from my own religious background. Christianity is where I come from, a very conservative aspect of it, Pentecostalism. And as a result of that, you look at some of the ministers today, I won't name any names, but it's not hard to find out who they are. They're the ones who are megachurch pastors who have thousands of people who give to their churches. And these ministers not only accept all this money from the people who are poor and really can't give, but these people on stage say, give until it hurts. That's what they literally say. And so these widows or widowers, people who are elderly, who can't afford much and have a fixed income, are giving out of the generosity of their heart. This money is going to these ministers. And what are they doing with it? They're buying a mansion. They're buying a helicopter. They're buying another mansion. They're having a party on a boat, a yacht. They're drinking and frolicking around to their heart's content because they have become so wrapped up in their own self. One of the things that I want to highlight today is human nature has not changed. You know, as a civil human minister, someone who's coming at this with the question of what's the human lesson here? What is it that I think can be taught to every person, regardless of our faiths or politics? Self-indulgence leads to suffering, especially when people are giving out of their hearts to help others. We need to address this in our society. It's not enough that we address it even in our churches, which it should have been addressed in originally. Unfortunately, we as human beings are going to have to start addressing this issue. Is it appropriate for individuals to ask for charity from people and to live in self-indulgent and exorbitant lifestyles? I don't feel it is. I don't think that Jesus did either, because it's not good for people to suffer who are giving out of their suffering to help others. It's going to the person who's not suffering at all, right? So the second thing, Jesus compares them to whitewashed tombs. It's pretty clear what he means here, right? So he's talking about, the term can mean a single tomb, but it also can mean like a mausoleum where, a group of people are buried. The idea is on the outside, they've painted it white. They have, bedazzled it in their own time, whatever that is. They put jewels or put fancy windows on it so that when they look at it, they see a beautiful tomb. But really on the inside, it is full of dead things. It's full of things that are unclean. In this culture, when Jesus uses that analogy, it's pretty offensive, and it's saying a whole lot, because dead bodies and dead things to them are things that are obviously unclean, that if you touch them, you may receive a disease, you may be cursed. There's a lot of things that are negative. So when somebody dies, there's a whole process for them, of course, to move the body and the remains to what we call Hades today, but they call Gehenna, so that they can put it on the garbage heap to burn and be, taken care of. But death in their society is an extremely unclean thing, and to touch somebody who is dead meant that you couldn't participate in any of the rituals because you were unclean. And so Jesus using this term unclean and using death to represent the Pharisees is not only offensive because it's pointing out the fact that they aren't good people, but it's also pointing out that they aren't even fit to do the jobs that they're supposed to do because they are unclean. And then he says, you are hypocrites on the inside and lawless. This word lawless, it essentially means abandoning the law. I mean, it's not too hard, right, to understand, but for them, they're experts in the law. They are supposed to be the ones who do the law perfectly. But Jesus is saying, in fact, you are without the law. So what does this have to do with us here and now, right? As a human being, maybe who is a person of faith, maybe who isn't, maybe who is a person involved in political parties, maybe somebody who isn't, what is it that we can all expect and apply to each other today? I truly believe that we must, and this is one of the core parts of my own ministry etiquette and the things that I require of myself and I really require of other human beings, and that is to be honest about what we observe and what we can't observe. Unless we are honest about who we are, unless we are honest about what we do, we cannot have communication in our society. And we can't address things that need to be addressed. Deceit and lying is not something that should be tolerated in our society. We have individuals right now who are doing this exact same thing. They are receiving money from people who are struggling and spending it on lavish luxury for themselves. And that's not just in the church, that's in our own taxes. Back then the Pharisees were essentially the political leaders of the day as well. It's no stretch to suggest then that Jesus was talking to his own political figures and saying, look, it is not appropriate that you are taking money from people who are working 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet, and you're living in luxurious surroundings and using their money to pay for that, even though you have a ton of money already. It's not right. It's unjust, it's unfair, and it's unreasonable. There are those of us, of course, who have been on the other side of the coin. I really started from a position of being a Pharisee myself. I came from the Pentecostal Christian background, which is very holiness driven, which is very purity driven. It's all about making sure that people see you as a pure person because you represent God on this earth. And because you wanted to be closer to God, you had to rid yourself of your own human inadequacies so that, God could somehow get closer to you or something. You wouldn't offend God as much. That led me to do exactly the same thing that these Pharisees are doing. I focused so much time on looking perfect, meaning dressing the right way, of coming across as somebody who's responsible, of not drinking, of not going to parties, of all these things that I required of myself. But I missed the whole intention of the law and these good teachings that are human teachings, and that is compassion, humility, forgiveness, peacemaking. The challenge for those of us who come from that place of being a Pharisee, of being hypocrites, of being so focused on our outward appearance and not caring about the more important things like compassion and humility and forgiveness and peacemaking, it's difficult for us. And just like Jesus is saying to the Pharisees here, when he's saying that you should clean the cup inside first and then clean the outside. The difficulty for the Pharisees, and the difficulty as it was for me, was that to clean the inside of the cup meant that I had to get rid of what was already in it. And that's tough. That means that I had to remove a lot of what I assumed. It meant that I had to remove a lot of what was comforting. It also meant that I was going to have to spend a lot of time working on things that nobody could see. Nobody can see that I'm working on being a kind person. Hopefully it'll translate its way out. But when I dress a certain way, when I act a certain way, when I conduct myself in a certain way, people can see what I am like. But Jesus points out, and I think rightfully so, that the first priority for us should always be to start with the ideals, to start with the virtues. The rest of that stuff follows naturally as a result of it. As we become concerned with being compassionate, we will be compassionate in our interactions with others. And that's what's going to be seen as designating us as a good person, as a good human being. I might encourage you today, in reflection of this, in thinking about cleaning the inside of our cups as well as the outside. Sure, and I titled this particular series, Botox-Skin Deep. We can focus on the outside of who we are. We can look a certain way. We can wear clean clothes, all of that. That's great, sure. And that's not saying that that's a bad thing, but we must and we need to focus on the things that are more important for us. Why is that? Because it gives us a society that is happy and fulfilled and peaceful. Because when we don't do those things, when we focus on the outside and instead of compassion, we promote suffering without even realizing it. And that suffering leads to rebellion and violence. So I might encourage you, as I had to do and I continue to do, to think about what's inside and to start meditating and praying and devoting some time in the morning, maybe on a walk, to think about what it looks like to be compassionate. What does it look like to be a peacemaker? And how can I do that today? I appreciate you joining in on this Bible study. I would love it. Please leave your comments or suggestions or ideas. Your contributions to this series and to even my personal progress and my personal development is really appreciated. And I know other people appreciate it as well. And I would love it, of course, if you would like my Facebook page. And if you're on YouTube, there's a little button down here that you should see. It says subscribe. Click on that. That way we can stay in contact with one another, because there's some really fun things that are going to be happening down the road, not too far out. I'm not in a place at the moment to chat about them, but they're in the works, and I'm pretty excited about that. So until tomorrow, when we meet again live at noon, I want you to know that I love you. And I hope you choose to love yourself. It's the only love in this world that we have really any control over. And now I invite you to join me as we go about the rest of our day, loving those around us the same way. Thank you.